Hello and welcome to episode 8 of this Inspire 2020 Visionary Leadership series. I'm really delighted and honored to be joined today by none other than John Mattone. Hi, John.
Simon, how are you?
I'm very well, thanks.
Good.
So John is, highly accoladed, world's top executive coach. I think Global Gurus org placed you in the top 3 of global leadership coaches and thinkers. You're founder of Intelligent Leadership Executive Coaching franchise and a multi-best-selling author. So it's a real privilege to have you here on the show.
Great to be here. Thank you, Simon.
So let's kick off. Maybe if you can just tell the audience a little bit about you, your background, and how you got to do what you do today.
Wonderful, Simon. Well, listen, dating way back, I got out of graduate school in 1980, Simon, long time ago. And I got my degree in industrial organizational psychology and went up for my PhD for a year. And I got married young. My wife and I have been married 42 years. We got married at 21. And we decided to move back to Boston, which is where really I'm from. Originally New Jersey, but my family moved to Boston. And so, I got the master's, PhD, I got tired of school. We moved back. I did the corporate thing for a few years.
Okay.
And at age 30, I launched the first iteration of my company. Did that for 10 years, traveled the globe, did no coaching, it was all speaking. And wrote a book in 1997 called Success Yourself. It was a massive failure. I was so disappointed. I don't think it sold, but maybe 5 or 6 copies. And literally, we looked at the bank account. There was no money. My wife said, it's time to go get a job. I went back in the corporate world for 15 years. Greatest thing I ever did was go back in the corporate world because I learned so much, through the successes and failures. And then had a calling. Literally, I describe it a calling. I'll be 64 this year. It was 9 years ago to go back and do what I was put on the earth to do. And so what I do is I coach primarily CEOs globally.
Yep.
I am privileged to work with some government leaders, not in the United States, actually abroad, primarily in the Middle East.
Yeah.
And my business has grown dramatically. My brand has grown dramatically. I'm very humbled by all of this. Yeah. We've just launched a franchise called Intelligent Leadership Executive Coaching, designed to bring my philosophy and process of coaching to the world. So It's great to be here. There's my background.
That's wonderful. And I know you were at the Pendulum Summit, which is a huge, great business motivation summit here in Ireland, beginning of last year. And I missed you, unfortunately, but it's great to see you now. So in terms of leadership itself, I mean, you've been a bit like me. I've had a corporate career, and I've been my own coach and a consultant now for the last 7 years. And for me, this is all a calling. For me, it's really about helping people, leaders and businesses succeed, right? That's what I'm about, and inspire and give confidence, because I think a lot of people, sounds like you come from a pretty humble background. You don't come across as egotistical or arrogant, similar to me. And a lot of people assume that good leaders and senior executives have to be arrogant and have to be otherworldly. But my experience is the best leaders are very down to earth and authentic. Would you agree with that? Do you think that's a necessary thing to be a good leader, to be authentic?
Yeah, there's a lot of people out there who, first of all, and you already know this, Simon, we do have a massive gap in leadership all over the world.
Yeah.
Despite all the books and all the people trying to move the needle, and including myself and yourself. And there's a lot of reasons for that. One thing is definitely the ego. I think the ego in a lot of leaders gets imbalanced. It becomes it's a continuum, and I do a lot of the work that I do is really geared towards getting somebody to be much more balanced in their self-concept and their ego.
Yeah,
it's out of control in many respects. And what I've discovered, and I'm sure you've seen this too, is that for us to be the best that we can be as leaders and people, and provide abundance to the world, which is why we're on the earth, right? Yeah. We're not on the earth for ourselves.
Yeah.
despite what everybody thinks, right? A lot of people run around and say it's about me. It's not about you. You know,
Yeah.
it's about others, and especially with a pandemic situation, it's even heightened.
Yeah.
I believe that the greatest leaders in the world need a balanced self-image, obviously a strong conviction about themselves and their teams, right? But the ability to counterbalance that with a heavy dose of what I call vulnerability and humility is the important counterbalance ingredient, in my opinion. You know, so I'm with you 100% in that observation.
Yeah, no, absolutely. And I wish a lot more, without naming names, I wish a lot more politicians could drop some of that ego. But anyway.
No question.
In terms of, so how have you seen leadership change, or business, your clients' reception to the sort of work you do change over the period that you've been doing this work?
I believe that it's changed dramatically. So we live in what kind of, world? We live in a VUCA world.
Yeah.
We do, and it's never going to end. It's never going to end. Right now we're dealing, all of us globally, with a very disruptive pandemic. Simon, in a couple more years, it'll be something else that we can't predict. It's just never going to end.
Yeah.
And, I see incredible technological advancements in the world. Now we got artificial intelligence and, blockchain and so on and so forth. And, despite all those technological advancements, to me, it is the human spirit.
Yeah.
It is the depth of the human spirit that ultimately is the strongest element in the world, even perhaps stronger than a vaccine. Isn't that interesting?
Yeah.
So, I think a lot of leadership, in terms of really understanding the core of what it takes to be great as a role model, and touch hearts, minds, and souls, is to recognize that leadership is so much beyond the cognitive part. We got a lot of smart people running around. That is not the differentiator in the world.
I agree.
That we got too much of this.
I agree.
We need more. We need more of this.
Absolutely.
So I did work with Steve Jobs, in 2010.
Yeah,
and I got to tell you, it was very interesting working with him. He's a very good example. And there are many examples out there, and I'm sure you've worked with him too, where so many people have a hard time showing this. This is the challenge, right? How do you show it and still come across as a courageous person? He struggled with that, but he did show glimpses of his heart. And so I'm asked all the time, how did he show glimpses? Well, when I worked with him, I didn't see much of it. Yeah. And of course he was dying. It was very late. Go back to his speeches and you watch him speak. He was a great speaker.
Yeah.
And the reason he was a great speaker, he was highly intelligent, but what you saw on the platform was the expression of his heart. Absolutely. See, when he spoke, he couldn't, he couldn't hold it back. So
You're right. You were kind of drawn to him.
Yeah.
Magnetism.
No question about it. And he moved. Notice he didn't stand behind a podium.
Absolutely.
Right. So long story short, we need to embrace leadership as the combination of heart, mind, and soul.
Yep.
And especially in a virtual world with big time VUCA, that's never going to end. The extent to which the leaders who are listening in, the young people, and I'm very, 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 very excited about the future. We have so much young talent in the world.
Yeah.
We gotta cultivate. We gotta cultivate the heart, and get people to see it's not weak to show your heart. It is, in fact, it is courage. And once you get into that zone of showing your heart, that's how we can move the world in a positive direction.
Absolutely. There's so many things that came into my head that I identified with. So for example, I amongst a lot of things, I teach programs on, closing deals and negotiation. And I run a program with an American college over here, and I call it The Heart and the Mind of the Negotiator, which is named after a book by Professor Lee Thompson from Kellogg University. And she knows we use the name. And for me, that's what it's about. The old school bashing the table, you must buy from me. Those days have gone. It's about adding value and building relationship and connecting through the heart. The other thing that really
absolutely
resonated was when you mentioned the heart, mind, and soul. I'm just finishing a book called Into the Magic Shop by an American neurosurgeon called James Doty. It's one of the best books I've ever met. And, you know, he came from an alcoholic family, poverty stricken, and at the age of 12, walked into a magic shop in California, and over 6 weeks was taught some of the stuff you've mentioned about humility and awareness and mindfulness by an amazing woman, and became a neurosurgeon later on. And he articulates, and he's a world authority on the connection of the mind and the heart, right? And
Absolutely.
He's convinced that yes, most thoughts come from the mind, but actually, and it's been proven biochemically, through the vagus nerve, that certain emotions, which are essentially thoughts, emanate from the heart. You know, there's a direct connection between the brain and the heart through the vagus nerve. And so he says, you know, when you need to make a decision, first of all, relax your body, clear your mind, then crucially form an honest self-awareness about what you want to do and who you want to be, and only then set your goals and your intent. And it sounds like that's what you were saying. Now negative people, cynical people could use that honesty gate and be dishonest and set a dishonest intent. But my experience of good leaders is that they are ethical. They always think they want to think, you know, win-win and sustainable. Would you agree with that? That at the end of the day, you're going to get flushed out as a leader if you're not thinking win-win.
No question. I'm with you 100%, tracking with you 100%, Simon. So ultimately, you know, what am I known for? I guess I'm known for working with leaders in helping them drive their inner core. In many respects, which is what you're talking about. You're talking about the inner core. It's otherwise known as the soul. That's the soul, right?
The soul, yeah.
And what's interesting is, you know, I'm not the first person to talk about this stuff. Stephen Covey talked about it. He talked about it differently. But what I've seen in my work and in myself that I bring hopefully to leaders is that if the inner core, which is your self-concept and your value system, right, your thinking patterns, how strong, mature, and, you know, your emotion, that's all the stuff that resides very, very deep. And if the inner core is strong, mature, and vibrant, there's a much higher probability that beauty will spill to the outer core. And that's what the world sees, right? So I get approached by a lot of executives, and they say, John, I'm very successful, but I know something's missing. And these could be people in their 50s, even early 60s that I've worked with, Simon. And first of all, it's great that they know that they got things to work on.
Absolutely.
And when we start to work together, we discover, boy, you know, there's some stuff hiding on the inside. Both strengths and weaknesses that they're totally unaware of, right? And that ends up becoming an igniter for the leader. So I'm with you 100%. You know, it's an algorithm. It truly is, right? Thoughts control emotions, emotions behavior, behavior results.
Absolutely.
It's an algorithm.
Absolutely.
And once we help people understand that whatever result they get in life, by and large, is a function of the quality of their thinking. It's all connected.
It's all connected.
I love this. It is.
No, I agree. So just on that point, so I ran a poll on Twitter about a week ago, and I said to people I was going to be talking to you, and I said, what should be the first thing I ask you? And I asked them 4 options. Should I ask you, how should leaders think? How should leaders inspire? How they should believe, or how they succeed? And what came out far in advance was, how does John think leaders should inspire? Well, what do you think of that? How should leaders inspire? Because a leader's only a leader if they have followers. So how do leaders inspire people to follow them?
Well, first of all, there's a lot of elements here around mindset to our point that we just talked about. You know, if I look at leaders who are very inspirational, they're very, very powerful in getting people to believe. As being different than thinking that you can do something. Which we've got a plentiful supply of in the world. There's a lot of people running around and say, I think I can do this. But ultimately, the key to inciting action is truly believing in the depths of your soul that you can. You believe that you can do it.
Yeah.
you know?
Yeah.
And so the greatest leaders, especially in this world today, I believe going forward, there's going to be a premium placed on them getting their team and their individuals
Yeah.
to believe that they can execute what needs to be executed in support of the vision, mission, purpose of what we're all here for, right?
Absolutely.
That's important. I think the second thing is, Simon, is this whole notion, and by the way, these are leading indicators and predictors too, which is the will do, the passion. We don't have enough passion, honestly, so it's okay if you're a leader and you show a little bit of passion, it's okay. It's okay to show your heart,
It's human. It's human.
It is human. It's okay to let it out, and we need more of that. Okay, it's okay to be professional and self-contained and all of that stuff. You got to strike a balance because when you show your heart, you're going to ignite the heart, and we need more of that. And I think the third thing that is important, another leading indicator, is this whole notion of alignment. And we have so many people who feel unaligned in their families, right? In their organizations, unaligned. The greatest leaders in the world are going to create ways for people to feel aligned with mission, vision, purpose, simultaneously aligned with achieving their core purpose. And if you can do those things, right, you're going to see motivated people and teams moving the needle in the world.
Wow. It's interesting. The second, so this is the 8th in the series, but the second interview was with amazing, passionate, inspiring guy by the name of Ted Rubin, who is from Florida, lives in Florida. He's the CMO of Photify. And he's I think he's the world's leading social media guru, right? And very like you, he talks about, the best leaders, honesty is critically important. And even if that means showing some emotion, even if that means sometimes coming across as a bit abrupt, if you know that you're being honest to your core and you're being honest in the service of other people, then showing emotion is fine. It's fine. I honestly think that some of the backlash in politics around the world the last 5 or so years has been because young voters particularly want to see some honesty in their politicians. They're kind of over the old cardboard cutout bureaucrats, and whether it's gone the right way or not is another conversation.
Yeah, we need some more time for that.
Yeah, no,
Simon, for sure.
Absolutely. Now, the next question. So you kind of answered the first two together, thinking and inspiring, but then the third, what came third was, and you've kind of alluded to it a bit, was how should good leaders behave? And I guess I'll add to that. I mean, do good leaders need to behave differently today than they did, say, 20 years ago? And do you think they'll have to behave differently in the future? What do you think about leadership behavior?
It starts with character. And, we've talked a little bit about it. What does that mean? It's multifaceted. First of all, if you hone in on the elements of character and you embrace and role model and totally internalize what good character is, there's no stopping you in the world. There's literally no stopping you, right? So things like being courageous, things like being humble, showing gratitude to others, the point that you just brought up, honesty, loyalty, modesty. Those are engines. And if those engines are moved in a positive direction, it's only going to yield good behavior, So that's important. I think thinking differently and thinking big as we move forward, being a transformative thinker, letting people know that the comfort zone that we're in is in many respects it's an enemy, and in the VUCA world, the best leaders are going to need to be role modeling disruptive thinking, being innovative, thinking outside which takes courage, being vulnerable, being open to feedback, willing to raise your hand and say, I need input from others, having the courage to look inside. I think that's important. I think leaders going forward need to leverage their gifts and strengths. Be proud of the gifts and strengths that have been given to you, but never take them for granted.
Absolutely.
And constantly nourish those gifts and strengths, and the people around you search for the gifts and strengths that they bring to the world, and help them nurture them. Those are behaviors that I think are going to be really, really important. And I think also this whole notion of the ability to read and course correct, how important it is. And again, with the VUCA world, the ability to read, adjust, and be nimble. You got to be nimble, whether you're a person, whether you're in a family, organizations, governments. We need to be very agile. Agility is going to be a predictor, I think, going forward.
It's a great point, because that perfectly segues me onto my next question. So I amongst the many things I do, I'm running a program through a government body here, start next week, called Building Your Confidence to Rebalance Your Business. Okay. And that title actually came out of a lot of research and talking to mainly small and medium business owners that they're lacking confidence to pivot, right? So they need the skills to build their confidence, or they need at least to be made aware of some of the things you've mentioned around motivation, belief, self-confidence, awareness. But that's the first part. The second part then is you've got those tools, then you need to then use them to pivot and rebalance your business. And
absolutely.
There's a huge amount in this, and people are asking for help and crying out for help. Leaders need to be the bridge between the current and the future. Okay. And I guess my question is, you've kind of alluded to it. I've been a CEO of a subsidiary of an American multinational in Australia, and it's a lonely place being a CEO, right? I've been there, right? Because everybody below, a lot of people below you want your position. The board you report to are your bosses, and you don't have anybody sitting beside you. It's a lonely place. And those CEOs need to make decisions based on 50% information, particularly now. Like, they have to make decisions they don't know what the revenue is going to be in a year. How do leaders do that? How do good leaders provide a bridge to the future with obscure information to hand? Do they act on gut feeling? What do they do? Is there a mystery or magic that leaders grab onto to make them good leaders, to make decisions with limited information?
There's a couple of things there. There's no question we live in a big data world. I think going forward, the truly savvy CEO is going to be attending to data. No question about it. And the data is getting better and better and better and more granular and predictive and so on and so forth. Predictive analytics. However, to your point, the best executives in the future will be able to balance that tendency of big data with gut instinct. Okay. Now the question now becomes, right, how do you cultivate a gut instinct, number one, and number two, how do you learn how to leverage it? And it comes back to, you better be self-aware. You better be open to feedback and perspective. You need to know your preferences, because there's a lot of executives out there who they have certain preferences about how they want to operate, right? And what's interesting is success in particular situations, in fact, all situations, often requires to act sometimes counter to your preferences, which again comes back to the notion of being very agile, attending to your inside, knowing your references. Your past can yield a lot of information that will mitigate risk going forward if you're willing to look inside.
That makes complete sense. I at one stage in my career, I was head of legal for Europe, Middle East, and Africa for a California-based company, a great company called Xilinx, semiconductor manufacturing company. And at the time, the CEO was a really inspiring leader, a Belgian guy called Wim Rolants, right? And he had this saying, and I don't know whether it was his or not, but I loved it. And it was, and he was just so inspiring, because he had his corner desk office like all CEOs do. But what was great about him, he would actually move around the whole of the campus and sit with members of staff for a period of time.
Wonderful. It's wonderful.
And his comment was, his phrase was, democratic decision making, dictatorial execution. And I'll never forget that. And I don't really know. I like it. I never asked him what he meant by it, but to me, it seems to be that the best leaders, and he was great, managed to cultivate an environment where they can gather as much information as they need
Absolutely.
to make then a strong, savvy decision based on gut feeling. Is that kind of what you're alluding to there?
Yeah, there's no question. The ability to come out of your comfort zone,
Yeah.
to be vulnerable, to be open to your stakeholders, everybody be open. We can literally learn anything from any human being if we just open up. You know, it's interesting. We could meet somebody in the street and go up to them and say, I got a challenge, I got a problem. Can I share it with you? They look at you and say, sure. And you bring it up and you say, you know, and you say, do you have any suggestions for me? And guess what? If we kept on doing that, it would be amazing. The suggestions that we would get, and then we have the choice to. So with the ability to go out, seek, be vulnerable, be courageous, coalesce. The ability to coalesce, Simon. Right? Take that information, consider it, decipher it, and then ultimately, boom. When it's time to make a decision,
do it.
You do it with conviction, with courage, with passion, and precision, and then that's it.
Absolutely.
You know, that's what we need.
Absolutely. Which kind of then leads me on to the next question around leadership coaching, right, as a discipline. Okay. And this is kind of a little bit off the wall, this question, but, you know, given that we're particularly in this period of time, which is a real, I wrote an article for Irish Tech News, and I did a podcast on, you know, probably, you know, there are circuit breaker periods in history. I call them circuit breaks. So World War II, and there was huge innovation. The space race, huge innovation. And I'm convinced, and you know, I interviewed Stephen Kelly, who was the former CEO of Sage, and Ed Rubin, and I've got amazing guests coming as well. I'm convinced that if new innovation doesn't come out of this, current innovation technology will definitely accelerate. Okay. And I guess my question is then, if we're all going to be working a lot more online, and I think we are, I really do think we are.
I do too.
How do leadership coaches like you and me and others, how do we adapt to that new, less face-to-face environment?
Well, I'm doing it right now. You're doing it.
Yeah.
It's interesting. I prefer face-to-face.
Me too.
And typically at the CEO level, most CEOs prefer face-to-face.
Yeah.
You know, but it's incredible what is happening, that you can really do a lot of this work, Simon.
You can.
Virtually. I think there are certain points, especially in my process, where, you know, you kind of prefer to be face-to-face.
Yeah.
But I ran a senior executive for a law firm here in the United States going back about 3 weeks ago. We had 10 senior executives, chairman, CEO, and then the other senior executives on a team building virtual event for 5 hours. Wow. And literally we had 4 people crying.
Yeah.
I would have never predicted that.
Yeah.
So I think you're right. I think this is the future. I do look forward, by the way, to getting on airplanes and doing my fair share of flying, because I do miss it. I did travel like a crazy person the last few years. Yeah. But I feel really, really privileged to have the opportunity actually to kind of settle in, and we can do great work virtually, just great work.
Absolutely.
And I think it's going to continue, and you can have really authentic conversations. So this is the future. There's no question.
No, it is. And it's interesting. A good friend of mine, Samantha Kelly, who is another guest on the show, she's called the Tweeting Goddess, and she's built up a huge global following. And she is just a maestro on Twitter, right? And and she's helped me. She's taught me how to leverage Twitter, right, in an ethical, win-win, synergistic, value-giving way. And she's kind of taught me to I can now watch some of the messages on Twitter, right? And I can now get an appreciation. If somebody is trying too hard, if somebody is being disingenuous, if somebody is being naive, but they're just trying the hardest, right? And I can now kind of almost sense that, right? Oh, yeah. And then I think it was Ted Rubin I was talking about. And I think he said, in some respects, it's easier to trust somebody online, right? Maybe this is for the younger generation, to trust online than it is face-to-face. I don't know whether he's right or not, but I think there's something in that, because like you and I are sitting facing each other here, like we're thousands of miles away,
I know.
And right now we have no alternative but to focus on this, right? So,
True.
and also he said, to get online, you have to make a real effort. Like you needed to have known who I was. I need to know who you were. So a lot of
Absolutely.
that peripheral stuff that you do when you meet face to face has been done. And there's something in that. I mean, what do you think about that? There is something in that.
There's nothing like laser focus,
Yeah.
and we live in such a distractible world.
Yeah.
And there's no question when it's just you and me, right?
Yeah. Yeah.
So I've turned off my notifying. I got my cell phone here, and
Yeah.
there's nothing else in the world other than Simon and John right
Yeah.
now, right? So there's something powerful about that, which
There
is
is.
a special space, right, that
Yep.
you and I are creating
Yep.
that enables us to connect heart, mind, and soul.
Correct.
Where a lot of times, when you're physically somewhere,
Yeah. Yeah.
there is a lot of distraction, even if you're in a conference room with a person one-on-one.
Absolutely. Absolutely.
You might tell them, listen, we're gonna meet for a couple of hours. Would prefer that we not have the cell phones going on, but still, what ends up happening? Cell phones, right? This and that.
It always happens.
Yeah, it does. It does. No question.
Yeah. So just to bring this to a close, John. So if, my daughters are 2021 and one of my daughters wants to go into marketing or HR, I think. And so there's a lot of millennials I've written about. I call them the generation entrepreneur, the millennials, the X and Ys, and I teach them as well. And they are bursting full of, I used to think they were snowflakes and they knew nothing and their head was in the phone, and their head is in the phone a lot, but they are very smart and they're burning to learn stuff, and they're much more open-minded, much more environmentally friendly, much more
question.
Open-minded generally. So they will be leaders. They will be the leaders. If you were going to whisper in the ear of an aspiring leader 2 or 3 words of magic wisdom, things that you've learned, what 2 or 3 things would you say to that aspiring leader to really be the best leader they can?
It's a wonderful question. I would say do a little bit about what Bill Gates does, which is he takes time to reflect. He takes time to think.
Yeah.
And he takes time to read.
He does.
It's very interesting that innovative thinking comes from actually distancing yourself from complexity. What enables that is taking time out of the craziness to do those kinds of things. And I think it's going to be more and more difficult as time goes on to be able to do that. So I would tell any young person, any person going forward, you've got to make the decision to do that, because you're going to find yourself thinking about things differently and better at a higher level, and then you got to bring that to your teams. I think that's important. And then the other thing, Simon, we kind of referenced it earlier, I've got four that are 27 to 36. Those are my 4 kids.
Yeah.
And it's exactly to your point. Learning agility. I think be proactive. Go after it. Go after information. Don't sit back ever. Be very aggressive in going after stuff that's going to make you a better person and a better decision maker. Agile around relationships. It is a dynamic world, and the best you can mitigate risk to the extent that you can read people and adjust, right?
Absolutely.
That's the key. Even if you prefer not to, well, that's too bad, because the world's going to come at you anyway. And I think the third thing is the whole notion of being really change agile. If all of us can go forward, I guess, with those 4 things, we got a great chance to achieve the vision for ourselves. And ultimately, it's not about ourselves. It's ultimately about what we can do to provide abundance in the world, ultimately.
I think you couldn't have summed that up better. And it was a wonderful conversation. There's
agree,
so
Simon.
much, listening back, there's so much that I'll enjoy listening back. And thanks so much, John. And thanks for your time.
Simon.
And so what's the best way for people to find out about what you do and your books and your company, etc., what's the best way for people to look at
Just, yeah, Simon, just really the website, I think's got a lot of information on it.
Yeah.
We're doing a couple of changes right now, but the website is very good. I think people can get in there and see, boy, you know, here's what it is that John and his team does.
Yeah.
It's www.johnmattone.com. Very simple.
Yeah, perfect. With that, John, it was great talking to you, and I'd love to keep in touch, and take care and stay safe.
You too, Simon. All the best to you and your family.
Thank you.
Thank you very much. Bye-bye. Thank you. Bye-bye.